What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod. We're giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan. I am joined by my co-host, as always, the great Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Just being great as always. How are you doing?
I I heard your gold hand actually grew back into a regular hand.
Yo, that was actually a promo shot, not in the real episode.
Yeah,
Hear that?
crazy.
People
I did
going
hear
for the
that.
digs.
People are. They're up in arms about Game of Thrones again, and we're going to be talking about that as well as a couple albums, couple movies, and the Veep series finale, which is kind of crazy that Veep is over, and I feel like it still is somehow underappreciated, even though it's won basically an Emmy every year it's been out. So
Right.
I don't think this year will be any different. Kind of, I guess, stepping on our review just a little bit. So we got a lot to talk about before we get into it. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod and you can listen to us any way that you want to. And give us a 5-star rating and review if you have a few seconds. I
Do
could
it.
do that on iTunes because it really helps us out, helps more people find us, and that's what we're looking for.
It's free.
So, yeah, it's free. It costs you like 5 seconds of your time. Um, Dave, Ari Lennox, Shea Butter
Yeah.
Baby. Um, no expectations going into this one for me, and I was really, really excited as this album wrapped up because I felt like this takes a lot of elements of a lot of different artists that we've enjoyed talking about, especially newer artists we've enjoyed talking about, like Georgia Smith comes to mind when
Mm.
talking about her. And I feel like this blends it in a really succinct and really refined way that I was incredibly impressed by. Um, I'm wondering, before we start talking about specifics of the album, what were your expectations going in, and how did you feel after you wrapped up the album?
Yeah, I hadn't listened. I think she's two EPs and a mixtape. I hadn't actually heard those, but I had heard some of her features on the Dreamville Revenge of the Dreamers project, the group label project. And I think she might have been featured on a Cole record recently. I don't remember. But for someone who'd been signed to Dreamville since the end of 2015, it's been a
Mhm.
while, right, to hear anything big. And like this is the debut album, but she's a 28-year-old R&B singer. That sounds like a late start given the talent, the cosigns. But yeah, I didn't really have any expectations because I didn't really have a strong, you know, frame of reference. But I too was very impressed with this, and as you suggested, I think it does continue the I think I saw this on Twitter. The black 20-something-year-old woman figuring her shit out, a la SZA and
Yep.
Georgia, and a little bit LMI, I suppose, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what I liked about it the most was that just it kind of like has like an old school vibe in terms of, as you said, like the sickness as an R&B record, but it's a very like contemporary lyrical content in terms of like modern dating and the ups and downs of that. So yeah, I liked it a lot. But what did you take away most from it? Because again, didn't have any expectations like me.
Yeah, you pointed out, I think, really smartly that there's this similarity between these kind of artists. You know, these 20-something female black females figuring shit out. But what she does is she infuses like 90s hip hop sounds into this in a way that I think is really intriguing. A song like trying to see my notes here. A song like FaceTime, I thought actually captures that feeling very well. Just kind of like the beats in that feel very throwback-ish, but also kind of keeping this more modern R&B soul sound that is so popular right now. Um, I also thought the features on this, like JID, I thought came in and
Oh
crushed
yeah.
it. Cole was good as always. I don't think he's had a bad guest verse in a long time at this point. I think overall the project's just very solid. The production on this is upper echelon, of course. Dreamville's great label. Yeah, I mean, just not really a bad thing to say about it. Anything that you would take away from this album that maybe wouldn't be so great?
No, I don't think so. I think ultimately it flows pretty well, as we said, and
Mhm.
I don't really have a whole lot to say in its favor. I just think it's really silky smooth R&B. It's hard to say much more about it. I mean, you
Yeah.
mentioned the beat for FaceTime. That's actually a Cole beat. He doesn't produce all the time anymore, but he's always been a very underrated producer, and he does produce under his own name. So that's cool to see him offer that up to one of his artists. How nice, right? But yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think this is gonna make some waves in R&B circles. I mean, shit. Remember, Her was nominated for album of the fucking year. Like, if Her can get so big, I mean, I hope Ari Lennox can get a lot bigger because this is a lot much more impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, and her won a Grammy for what was it, best new artist or best R&B album, was it?
Or
It was
urban
something like
contemporary,
that.
one of those weird categories. It wasn't best new artist, but yeah, she did win something. Shit, yeah.
I think it was best R&B actually. Now I'm saying it out loud, but yeah, I definitely agree that Ari Lennox. There's more here than anything we listened to uh, with any of those albums last year, at least related to her. Um, I also want to give a shout out to the song "Whipped Cream," which I thought was really really good. One of the standouts to me on the album, and obviously we've already added "Broke" with JID onto our Nowstalgia Best of 2019 playlist. Search that on Spotify and give us that follow and share it with all your friends so you can stay up to date on all the music we're talking about and the best
Oh
music of the
yeah.
year. Any last thoughts before we move on to your guy, Logic?
No, I also liked Chicago Boy. I believe the first track. But yeah,
Yeah,
overall, very impressed. Nice coming out party for sure. And it's got a lot of love over the weekend, so I feel confident that it'll continue to make news. And you are correct. Her did win Best R&B Album a few months ago.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Big surprise for me there. Let's move on to Logic though. So I call people your guy a lot just to kind of poke you a little bit, add a tiny bit of humor. It's not very funny, but add a little bit of humor on here. But Logic really is your guy. I mean, you've been
Oh,
been standing for him, I think, and I say standing loosely too on this, but I feel like you really have stand for Logic in the past. So you really have been there and been a big fan of him longer than a lot of other people have.
well, that is true. Yes, and I've seen him live 3 times. Been I think I started listening to him
And
like
he's great
20.
live.
Yeah, he is very good. 2012 maybe. Like yeah, I was listening a long time. Definitely before the fame, before he was popular for sure. But I've been very up and down in my fandom of him as his creative output has waxed and waned. So I was not super jazzed about this album. Again, he announced it only like a few days before it came out, and I kind of expected it was coming given all the singles he had been dropping. They had the similar single art aesthetic from Sam Spratt, like the cover. So you kind of figured it was coming, but yeah, I wasn't super hyped about it. And then when I heard it, I was like, yeah, okay, wasn't I was right to not really care too much. But what did you think as a new evangelist to the Logic cause, the Church
I
of
mean,
Bobby Biracial?
we talked about Logic first, what, 2017 with everybody, I think was the first time we reviewed.
Yep.
I don't think we got to Bobby Tarantino one. And I think then we talked about Bobby Tarantino two. And I think we talked about Young Sinatra
Sinatra 4
four.
last year. Yep.
But so we talked about him quite a bit on here. And my stance on Logic, he's a very good technical rapper.
Oh
I
yeah.
think he punched above his weight in a lot of ways, and he's also, I think, uses his platform for a lot of really meaningful topics, which I give him a lot of credit for. On Young Sinatra 4, the song that probably stood out to me most was the Wu Tang song,
Fuck
and it
yeah,
stood out
dude.
because it was an awesome Wu Tang song. But it was a solid album, but I don't think there was anything on there that I took away being super memorable. And that kind of continues for me on Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, because while I think that this is well produced, well constructed, he's the same old rapidy rap self on here. I don't think that there's anything I'm gonna be talking about year end on here. I don't think there's any songs I'm even gonna be really remembering much. Maybe Keanu Reeves in a bit, but that's probably going to be because John Wick 3 is coming out, and I'm going to be thinking about Keanu Reeves a bit more. I don't know. There's some good and some bad on here, but it sounds like you're pretty disappointed with this.
Well, I think this actually kind of continues a conversation we've had several times now, the whole album Logic versus mixtape Logic, a meta convo that Logic has addressed on past projects at this point. But, with Bobby Tarantino 2, that was kind of like the modern day trap influenced contemporary sound Logic spin on that, right? The Young Sinatra 4, the other album from last fall, was more of the back to the basics, come up Logic, 90s inspired, sample heavy Logic. And his albums have largely been kind of down the middle in that regard, where he's much more conceptual, but doesn't usually go as hard as he did on those tapes. So Young Sinatra 4 was kind of refreshing for the old heads because they're like, yeah, we know you could still do this, but it was cool to actually have you try. Now, for Confessions, just sounds a lot like Bobby Tarantino 1 and 2 to me, and I was not a big fan of those just because ultimately I think Logic doing braggadocio, I'm so rich and successful now, fuck all y'all, is not that interesting when it's coming from Logic. Like if I want that kind of rap, which is all fine and good, I'm just going to ask someone else to give it to me. Whereas Logic, I feel like, because he's a more thoughtful guy, as you said,
it doesn't seem sincere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, when it coming from him, it almost feels a little lazy. Like I know you could try and write better songs, but you're just kind of phoning it in on this because you're a technical guy. So it's not hard for you to make these songs. I mean, it speaks to his talent, obviously, but I would just prefer him to not just make these like victory lap albums because I feel like they don't do anything for me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And I think it's a great point. And I do wonder what it is about the mixtapes that seem to bring out so much more in him. Because I think that there is a stark contrast, just from the last two. Young Sinatra 4, for me saying it wasn't memorable in a lot of ways, felt like it just had more energy. Felt like he just had more that he was trying to get across in terms of message. And here it almost feels a bit contrived at times. We were talking before we got on air about the song. I'm trying to make sure I get it right. Clickbait. Yeah, right. Thank you. And how Logic is a very thoughtful person who, like I said before, brings messages into his songs that you don't hear a lot of artists talking about. Clickbait falls a bit flat because it doesn't feel like he's actually hitting the point home that he thinks he is, or maybe doing it in the best way. And it just kind of comes across as like,
I mean, for me, clickbait specifically, which I think on its surface sounds fine. Like it's not like it's a disgusting song or anything, but he thinks that he's making like a much deeper dig or punch back at his critics than he really is. Like it's not actually that witty. And ultimately, I feel like a lot of the things he talks about on Confessions of a Dangerous Mind is just pointing at his internet critics. And, it's weird because I was actually looking up. This is projected to do like 75, 80,000 first week. It'll be his third number one. Obviously, a very successful week. But this is a far cry from Everybody, which did almost 250. And it's kind of weird. And a lot of that's driven by 1-800 being a mega smash hit. But it is kind of weird seeing him kind of crest a little bit. But regardless, he has this huge fan base. Why do you care about the haters so much? I almost would rather you double down on the fans that got you here. Yeah. And I think just making music that sounds like everybody else but doesn't rise above it isn't really the best way to go about that. Obviously, your fans will be there regardless, and the money's not going to stop flowing or anything. But it's funny. We didn't even talk about Supermarket, which is the soundtrack album he released at the end of March, following up his book that he made. And Supermarket was critically panned, like as panned as something can be, because he just does all this like stadium rock and guitar heavy and lots of singing, and it's just nothing Logic has ever done before. And Shocker, he's not actually good at any of this. And
man,
I didn't even ask you to listen to it, let alone review it, just because there was no point in just shitting on something for 5 minutes, But
Did he sound
I
like Kevin Rudolph?
yeah,
Do you
God,
remember
maybe. I mean, he's all over the place on it, but
that?
I just he just has an era right now of my shit doesn't stink. I can do whatever I want. And while yes,
Mm,
technically you can do whatever you want, I think creatively it's just a little. He just seems a little listless. You know, now that he found all the success and popularity and money, and he name drops a million people in the game on this, it's like he doesn't feel like he has a musical purpose right now. I don't know.
yeah.
So
You know,
again, it's not like the worst thing I heard. Obviously, he's very competent, very technical guy, and he's good ear for production. But it just nothing stands out about the album.
the point you brought up about him talking about his haters more than focusing on the fans that got him there feels almost like a conversation on like the nature of artists, you know, because there is that like that piece for many artists where they feel doubted in some way, and that drives them to push themselves to reach another level, to put out better content. And once they reach that level, it's like, now what? What am I pulling from? What am I talking about? And this is, I think, a lot of times what happens with the rock artists we talk about who put out that great first
Mm.
album, and then after that, it's like, what do I have to say? What do I really want to get at? And it feels like for Logic, and we give him a lot of credit for being a smart artist, so to speak, someone that at least is talking about issues that no one else is talking about in his songs. I really wonder, maybe he's finding right now he doesn't know what his voice is because he's not sure what he really is trying to say. He's reached a level of success, and it happened fairly quickly for him. I mean, I know he's been
Mhm.
around for a long time, but he really blew up pretty quick and
Yeah.
reached this another stratosphere. And I wonder if he's still grappling with, now that I'm here, what do I really want to talk about? What do I really want to do with this? And I have no doubt he'll figure it out. I don't think we're going to keep getting this quality of albums from him, but I'd almost like to see him maybe try to make like an album with somebody else, something where he's like
Mm,
pushing himself to collaborate and see if that can
interesting.
inspire something from him. Any songs on here that you want to touch on, or that you would recommend people check out?
I mean, yeah, I mean, still ball, and that's a follow up to Indica Badu, another Wiz feature. I thought that was okay. Commando, a G Easy, that's clearly a song for the white women. I'm sure that'll do well in those radio stations. My favorite song is Mama slash Show Love because it has YBN Corday. Very
Mm,
inspired feature choice. He's not really a secret anymore, but still, it's nice that a Def Jam rapper would put Corday on his
mm-hmm.
album. I like that. He just announced a tour with JID and Corday. That sounds like a fantastic tour, the three of them. Uh, I did not like Homicide with Eminem. I thought Keanu Reeves, he goes really hard on it, but it just kind of went out went in one ear and out the other for me.
What about
I
Don't
thought
Be
the Will
Afraid to Be
Smith
Different?
feature was just a big gimmick personally. It's kind of
Yeah,
funny,
that's
but whatever.
I felt the same way. I was like, Will Smith on this track just feels like
Th-
you're trying
Then
to get
then
attention.
then again, on everybody, he had Neil deGrasse Tyson and Ansel Elgort. He's had shock features before, so whatever.
um, so Logic, not sure if we'll have one of his songs on there, but Ari Lennox we will. Again, check out the playlist, Nostalgia Pod Best of 2019. Let's talk about Veep. So Veep wrapped up its final and seventh season last night, and boy, you've watched it in a pretty condensed
Yeah, I have.
time frame. I've been following it. I wasn't right on Veep when it first came out, but pretty quickly, I think I tuned in the second season or so. And I think there's a lot to say about Veep as a comedy in the times that it came through. But as someone that has watched it more recently, what's like your main takeaway of the show?
Yeah, I've watched the whole show this year. Um, Very condensed. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
watching the early seasons, the Armando Iannucci seasons in 2019, it is kind of funny that you see it like the before and the after of the show, before David Mandel took over as showrunner, where it starts off as an Obama era show, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a different kind of political joke making you do when you make that kind of show. And I think Veep started out as a very observational and obviously satirical take on modern politics but it largely existed in contrast to something seemingly Shakespearean like House of Cards, right?
Hmm.
Fast forward a few seasons, House of Cards critically craters, obviously. Donald Trump shows up, then gets elected, and then we have the concern trolling that I remember being aware of, even though I watched the show. It's like, oh, how do you satire when the real satire is happening realistically right now? Like, how do you do it in the age of Trump? And it did
Yep.
feel like season 6, the first season that had any creation under the era of Trump, was still kind of finding its footing. Whereas season
Mhm.
7, which obviously just wrapped up a condensed season, took a while to get going, get shot given the cancer from Julia Louis-Dreyfus. But it, I don't think it was the best season. I still think the early stuff is just like has the smartest writing. But I thought season
Mhm.
7 just gets super, super cutting and almost
Yep.
ups the ante on what it's satirizing. We're like, oh well, if current events are this ridiculous, then I guess we just have to make our show more ridiculous. But because it's still smartly written, and we've been with these characters such a long time, it pays off. And I think the finale in particular is just fucking really cutting, but
Yep.
it does feel like a natural closing of Selena's arc. So yeah, even though I rushed through the show at a pace I wouldn't have liked to watch it at, I still was a big fan of the overall crust of the show, but even this final season as well.
You touched on a lot of really great points. I agree. The early season writing is just like unbelievable, but I do think the quality of writing, even when it dips a little bit, probably like after season 4, still stays at such a high level. And there's so many. It's kind of like another show we talked about recently, Arrested Development, where it's
Mm.
almost like levels to the jokes, where it's like if you weren't paying attention to this thing that happened in season 1 or 2, you're not going to get how the joke evolved in season 4 and now is presenting itself in season 7. And it's a really class act, I think, in terms of how you write a show and how you develop characters over time and how you introduce other characters into the mix as well. Someone like Richard is a
Yes,
character that was introduced in the mid seasons. I think it was like season 4, maybe,
Brett.
and he just I think he became one of my favorite characters on the show.
Yep.
His like dry, direct, kind of like dim-witted,
Mhm.
but still really sharp humor was like such a refresher to like all the cutting and really just like mean-spirited humor throughout the rest of the show. He was really a breath of fresh air. Um, one person who really I think has evolved throughout the show, and I'm not sure in the best way, but I think in a really effective way, was Jonah,
Mm.
played by Timothy Simons. And Timothy Simons probably is one of the biggest risers from this show, a relative unknown going into it, and now a pretty well-known actor within comedy spheres in Hollywood. Uh, his arc, he starts off as like a decently competent person in the beginning, and just
Right.
like it's worn down into this like total caricature of idiot politics at this point. What
Hmm.
did you think about his like character arc over the course of the 7 seasons? I mean, he marries his sister,
Yeah.
his
Well,
actual sister.
well, he just starts out as like Jonad, right? He's just like the doof
Yeah.
that no one fucking respects. And that
Hmm.
certainly doesn't change. But I actually really liked how they had people using him uh, by running for office and pushing his
Yeah.
career. And I think it's just really funny. And because Simons is so uh, committed to the characterization of Jonah, he just delivers the lines so confidently that when people are ripping Jonah's asshole open, and then Jonah's just saying these matter of fact responses back and just taking it in stride, it's just some of the funniest things you've ever seen.
Yep.
And obviously, you can make the comparisons to modern day politics and the way everything's very partisan and hostile these days. It obviously doesn't
Hmm.
not break any news there, but having him just go like full tilt and like off the reservation, I thought it was pretty great because you had the levels, you had to keep leveling up
Yep.
in this new age, and he was kind of one of the more logical things to take to the next extreme. And it's still
I
funny the
agree.
whole time. Like if it wasn't funny, you know, maybe you don't laugh as much at his, kind of racist sentiments. Like, obviously, he's portrayed as the dick, so it's not like the show's endorsing
Hmm.
what he says, obviously. But he
Right.
says some fucked up shit, and I mean, then again, so does Selena's camp too. So I think you
Oh,
just gotta have to roll with it.
I mean, in the last episode, Selena's camp gives up gay marriage as a way of getting
Yeah.
her the election. I mean, the last episode, like you said, I
Shout
think
out
really
Dick
wraps.
Cheney and Vice.
Yeah. Crazy. And good call on that. I didn't even make that connection. Thinking back to I think the ending was so perfect. Even before they do the 24-year time jump to
Mhm.
after her death, is her uh, sitting alone in the Oval Office. Because I think if
Mhm.
anything you take away from this show, it's that. Uh, as much as you might like Selena Meyer as a character because you find her funny, she really is pretty despicable as a
Yep.
human being.
Stands for nothing.
And
Will do anything.
exactly.
Yada yada.
And I think having her sitting alone, getting what she wanted, but still being, it seems pretty unhappy, was a perfect way to kind of show it. And it seems like that's kind of the overall message for everybody in the show, except for maybe Richard, honestly, who ends up being, it seems like the best president the United States ever has in this world. Um, how did you feel like they did landing the I guess the overall moral of the story?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the shot of her being alone kind of uh, drives it home. But right before that, Selena makes Gary the fall guy for the Meyer Fund.
Yep.
And Gary is without a doubt the most loyal person she's had for the decade plus that they were to get 20 years there together, whatever it was. And just kind of showing that the length she would go to get something she always wanted and always failed to achieve through her own incompetence and lack of leadership and ideas and all that.
Mhm.
Having her truly like stab Gary in the back like that, uh, I liked it. Yeah, it's cutting.
And it
It's
made
hard, man,
sense. It
but it made
is.
sense.
And they do it in such funny ways, but when you really like break it down, it's really like it's a tragedy in a lot of senses. And we're going to be talking about an even bigger tragedy in terms of HBO show in a second. But I think I think if there was one episode of TV last night that really landed high expectations, I think it was Veep. So if you have a chance to go back, people are rewatch HBO shows a lot just because the quality of their catalog is undeniable at this point. But Veep is one that you shouldn't overlook. Um,
Yeah,
Thrown, and it's easy to watch. It's easy to get through.
yeah, testament to that. Yeah, I think ultimately, like the thing that made Veep so fun, just episode to episode, is that the casting was just so great, and then
Mhm.
combine that with the great writing, as we mentioned, and it just soars. But I mean, having like Gary Cole and Kevin Dunn as just side characters in the ensemble, guys that are just like comedy stalwarts that have been in the comedy making business forever, just
Mhm.
having them like off the bench just delivering fucking funny jokes, like it's great. And then I think obviously Anna Chomsky won or nominated for hella Emmys as Amy, and I think Amy has a really great arc as she goes through a shit ton throughout the
Yep.
show. And Reed Scott as Dan, another guy that like the characterization is just so precise, and you
Mhm.
always really know where Dan stands on things. Yet you still like watching him,
Yeah.
despite him being a insufferable person.
Each one of these characters are so distinct
Yeah.
and like well thought out, and they never do anything that's really outside of their character, which I think is uh, a testament to the writing because they didn't have to sell themselves out to drive plot. They always had a way of writing around it, which I thought was great. Any other thoughts?
No, man, I'm happy I made the time to catch up. Like I think I did it in 2 months, maybe a little less. Thank God it's a half-hour show, but
Any
you can do it too.
any lines or like anything from the show, any jokes from the show that really stand out to you as like their best? I have a line in particular that's coming to mind for me.
I mean, I don't remember any offhand, but the show produces legitimate laugh out loud moments, which is
Yeah.
easier said than done. And I think Early on, a lot of it's Jonah related, but I think by the end, I mean, it's basically everyone. But yeah, what did
Yeah.
you remember?
I don't remember which episode, but Jonah at one point in the early season says, "I'm eating so much pussy, I'm shitting clits," and that will forever be like my favorite line from the show.
Yep.
Also, the way Timothy Simons delivers it is just like you said. It's so confident, and
Mhm.
like he thinks it's like the like funniest thing ever said. It's fantastic. So, why don't we move on to Thrones though? All right,
Yeah,
Game of
let's do
Thrones,
it.
season 8, episode 5. Uh, the
The
Mad Queen, dude.
bells.
Yeah, the bells. I mean, really, this is just Danny evolving into the Mad Queen. Uh, the majority of the episode was the Battle of King's Landing, which,
Not really a battle, a sack.
yeah, yeah, I guess that's a much better way to put it. But Danny just running shit with Drogon. Apparently, like you really don't need an army when you have a dragon. Like,
Hmm.
I mean,
Shocker.
what could have stopped her? Yeah, I mean, my whole thing is just like, if it was this easy, I wish she had just gone and burned down the Red Keep like 3 seasons ago. Just get it over with. It's
Season
not good
7, episode
storytelling.
2 or something.
Yeah, would have been real nice just to be like, oh, okay, that's taken care of. Give a little bit more time to some of these other storylines that we've been talking about, which obviously could not have been driven forward if Cersei and Jamie had been killed that early. But I think more than anything, it just kind of comes back to the pacing of the show is the biggest problem. People are nitpicking at, oh, it doesn't make sense for Danny's character to all of a sudden have this heel turn while
Weak
while the
take.
bells were ringing. Yeah, I agree. I think it is a weak take, especially I was thinking back, and there's I think right as she like heel turns, there's someone screaming, "Queen Cersei, bring the bells," and I think that right there probably is what made her snap. Is this idea that she's basically made King's Landing bend to her will, and they're still calling someone else their queen at that point, and she's just
Hmm.
like, "Fuck this! They're never gonna really love me. They're never gonna really choose me over the people who are originally here." But still, I come back to, they've been building up to these things happening for a while. I don't think there's anything that's happened in the show where I'm like, wow, that doesn't make any sense for these characters to be doing these things. I think they're all
Mhm.
within the realm of possibility. I do think the pace of which is happening is a bit jarring because, you go from how methodical the early seasons were. I mean, how many, like the whole first season is like Tywin just like writing letters and just, setting up these elaborate traps. And then you just have a lot of plot happening within condensed periods. And it just feels like the show is just happening too quickly.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I haven't really had a problem with any one character decision or action. I think all of it has made sense and seemed logical in terms of the way the arcs were going. But because past seasons have been condensed in terms of just less episodes, less runtime, less runway to uh, pad things out, when character does A and then immediately does B, whether in the episode or an hour and a half later, the next episode, it does feel rushed, even if ultimately that direction would have made sense. And I think what happens between Brienne and Jamie, and then Jamie and Cersei, is a good example of that, where I actually really liked how it went down, but it did feel sped up as a
Mhm.
result. And uh, I'm not disappointed, but it just feels like the execution has hurt the effectiveness of things that should have been effective because it was the right thing to happen. Um, and some people have been surprised at Danny Breaking Bad, and again, as you said, that has been sown and laid out through 7 other seasons. She's literally burned somebody or something in every other season, for that matter. Um,
Yeah.
and they've laid the ground that she is insecure in terms of the support of the other people and feeling
Mhm.
like an outsider in the place she thought of was her true home. That's all been set up, but because it's the actual plot action is taking place in less amount of time, it just feels a little jarring, as you said. So I think I mean I kind of accepted the pacing would be off since last season. So I haven't really been letting it bother me. And I really liked last night, The Bells, because it was Miguel Sapochnik, and shout out all you people with bad TVs or bit rates or whatever. It was in the light. You could see. I'm glad everyone could catch up this time.
Shouts to all you people out there with bad TVs. That's a quote right there. You know, it's really as you were talking, I was thinking about this, and Danny, if this had been a regular season of Game of Thrones, right, and they didn't have to speed it up over 6 episodes, it was a regular 10 episode season. You have to think the battle for Winterfell is probably mid-season, and then they spent an episode planning the sack of King's Landing. Danny and John, there's a lot more in terms of their relationship falling apart and drama there. A lot more about Sansa and how she's kind of like sowing these seeds elsewhere. Varys and Tyrion working behind the scenes. There's just more that's showing like you would probably see more scenes of Danny looking gaunt and looking tired and looking just totally worn down. You see. Yeah, you see probably Varys trying to work more of like the little birds, trying to like poison Danny or whatever they were trying to do there at the beginning. There's just all these things that would have given it more like, you see what's happening. You're laying it out more. And that's what the time gives you, is it gives you time to show. And because there's so little time, they've had to tell us a lot of things.
Yeah.
One area where I think they actually really failed to show more than they did in other places was last night after Danny broke bad. They didn't show her. They didn't show any reactions of her other than her on the back of Drogon. And I felt like that was actually a bit of a miss. Because I think I guess after the Thrones, they talked about they wanted you to really get the feel of what it was like to be on the ground, what these common folk were going through.
Yeah, the terror.
And you definitely get that with Arya. But I almost feel like I got it. I understood it after like the first 10 or 15 times I saw a building explode or I saw fire burn these innocent people alive. I wanted to see what was going through Danny's mind. Was she just totally raging? Was she like in like a fugue state? Like I wanted to see like where she was at, because I felt like, this is a big heel turn for her. And the next time we're going to see her is sitting on a throne of ash. I wanted to see what that reaction was for her. And I felt like that was a bit of a miss in terms of the show.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I see a lot of people making jokes with the crossbows, the scorpions. I didn't have that big an issue with it, just because whether it was logical or not, the Rhaegal attack was a surprise, right? They weren't ready for it, and now having Danny do the Harrenhal dive bomb from the top and just fucking shit up, it's awesome. Okay with me. I mean, what the crossbows went like 3 for 100. Or they hit a home run game 1 and then went 0 for 4 the next day. Like, I don't know. It kind of adds up to me. I don't find that game breaking or anything.
It's still annoying, I think, more than anything.
Sure, it's an unforced error. Like, it's a nitpick that you didn't have to present for the nitpickers to pick.
Exactly.
I actually kind of enjoyed Euron and Jaime, and a lot of people have remarked that it kind of just shows the promise that Euron had. If his show incarnation was done a little differently. Euron's a character in the books that is much more layered and also a lot scarier and more formidable, but ultimately does a lot of stuff that was never even close to being addressed on the show. So it made sense that he was changed. In fact, having him be introduced to the show at such a late stage and kind of reestablishing the Iron Islands as an entity was a choice they made, and it had mixed results. But I don't know, having them scrap on the beach. It was cool because, like, obviously, no one wanted to see Euron kill Jaime, but I'm also happy Euron got fucked up and not just fried alive on a ship.
Yeah, I agree.
And then, like, obviously, Clegane Bowl was a big that
was awesome.
thing people have wanted for a long time. It's been on T-shirts for 3 years, and
did not disappoint.
Hound, no, absolutely not. And Hound is a character that basically served his narrative purpose already. He's obviously a fantastic character. Rory McCann has been great the whole time, but he kind of served his purpose up through his duel with Brienne. He redeemed himself in a certain sense. Arya learned from him, and we were good. But then he comes back to life, and again, it's also hinted that he'll do this in the books, but having him come back, it's kind of like bonus Hound, right? And we get him doing just cool shits at the Long Night and obviously Beyond the Wall.
Mhm.
But it would have felt weird that the Hound really came back to life if he didn't attempt to settle his score with Gregor, with Mountain. And I thought that was badass. I thought having Cersei like tiptoe around and be like, "Oh, let me get out of here. Y'all do your thing." Loved it. Also, the way
Yeah.
Sir Gregor fucking nonchalantly murders Qyburn, I thought was awesome. Because Qyburn's a
Yeah.
character that has been, I
Qyburn?
think, portrayed. Yeah, Qyburn. He's been portrayed pretty well for some time, but no one's really thought, oh, I wonder how Qyburn's going to die. And just having it be like just like a snap of the fingers like that, I thought was effective. And it's also kind of
Yeah.
fitting considering Qyburn's the reason the Mountain came back to life in a certain sense. And, you know, having like the Mountain remove some of his armor and really seeing how much of a reanimated corpse he really is. You know, shout out all the magic heads that don't think they get enough of that on the show. Well, you got some magic. You literally saw him being a fucking tank. So I thought it was
and
great.
a dragon the whole entire episode, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, the clicking bull hit. But you know what scene actually stood out a lot to me, and I was surprised at how emotional I got, was the Jaime Tyrion scene where Tyrion frees him. And that I thought was one of the strongest scenes yesterday because you know, I think it gets overlooked a lot, their relationship, but I think they really captured like that brotherhood. And Dinklage, I mean, I thought for sure he was gone this week. I'm glad he wasn't. I'm glad he survived, but I think he's been excellent with a character that's been evolving a bit this season, and they're not. I think they're not 100% sure how to keep Tyrion in this as he keeps taking these L's. Like, it also feels a bit. I don't know if it makes total sense for him, because I also think uh, it undersells a little bit of the intelligence of the character at times. But overall, I think that was great. I think the relationship moments are great too. Like when Danny was talking to John at the beginning of the episode and talking about how alone she feels, and John's trying to comfort her, say, you know, this is my queen, you're my queen forever, and then he like kind of pulls back from the kiss. I thought that was incredibly effective to kind of lay that twist that comes, you know, that feeling of being alone that Danny's dealing with. So the show is still top notch. It's just Game of Thrones has set such a high bar.
Yeah, exactly.
That no show is going to be able to maintain that, as you're also ending a beloved story that hasn't had its conclusion yet.
And it's also super wide and unwieldy as a narrative. I just laugh when people are like, Game of Thrones is bad now, and they're like 100% serious. Like, it's not bad. Relax. Like, I don't trust your critical opinion if you really think that, you know. And as we said before, you can be disappointed or pissed off at the pacing and thought things didn't land the way they should have. That is a totally fair way to feel. And I think most people feel that way, at least to some degree. But I just think people have been taking their distrust of the showrunners up to this point now, given what we've seen, and their disappointment in how the pacing has treated the story, and are now applying that to, oh, well, this arc isn't actually the way something to go. They're ruining characters. I just don't think any of that actually lands when you examine what's going on. Only one episode to go, though. It's kind of wild that it's basically done.
Yeah. Any predictions you want to make before we wrap up around Game of Thrones?
As everyone's saying, to quote Ramsay, if you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. And everyone's like, oh, well, Danny's definitely going to die by Jon or Arya. Yes, they're clearly probably the only two options there are to get it done if it was to happen. What if it doesn't happen? You know? What if Jon like turns his back on her and goes up north to hang out with Tormund and Ghost? Or just go live with Sansa? I don't know. Like, I'm curious to see how Danny acts after winning, after sealing the deal. Like, obviously she has her army that's still loyal to her, but will she just let the North go? It doesn't sound like that's something she would do, given every convo she had with Sansa earlier in the season. So I don't know. There's a lot to go down, and you know, it's an 80-minute episode once again, but it's not like it's a big battle episode, we assume. So I don't know. it could go any number of ways. I feel like it's kind of foolish to theorize at this point because most theories aren't incorrect now these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to have to be some sort of showdown between Danny and John, especially because, Grey Worm's going to narc on John about, pulling back his forces
Right.
as Danny is pushing forward. But yeah, I would like to see that, just go up north and just be like, yo, we're just going to chill up here. But Danny's not going to let that happen. She's going to come fly that dragon and burn shit to the ground. So it's going to be some sort of closure there. But yeah, to theorize at this point feels almost foolish because, I mean, there's just too many variables.
Right. We'll see
Also,
Bran again. I'll theorize that.
Yeah,
somehow.
And hopefully he'll have some importance because he right now is the biggest question mark. I think he's been all season. Like, what are you doing, Bran?
It's up to you.
Anyways, why don't we jump into 2 movies quick? We each watched a movie that we wanted to talk about in the pod this week. We're going to start with Under the Silver Lake, David Robert Mitchell, A24 production that has been pushed back from June of last year to December of last year, and now kind of dropped in no man's land. It originally premiered at Cannes, or Con 2018.
There you go. Cans.
Cans. American.
These cans of beans.
Uncultured Americans. And it was considered divisive. And, in watching this, I can totally see why that was the characterization it was given, only because it's not necessarily offensive in any way, but it does get a bit confusing. And it's like this like neo-noir conspiracy film that is sprawling. And, I'm not very familiar with David Robert Mitchell's other work. I'm aware of It Follows, but I don't really know much about it. I haven't seen it. And it seems like he was really trying to get at something here that he never quite landed the ship on. But there's enough here where I was left pretty intrigued. And I think with maybe a little bit more refining, this could be like the first look at a director who's ready to break out and really do some really interesting work. But this film really is buoyed by a pretty decent performance by Andrew Garfield, who I feel like it's post Spider-Man and hasn't really had a lot of roles that are too meaty. I mean, Silence, I guess, would have been the last.
That's what I've immediately thought of as well.
But even that, I think, was a film that was pretty forgettable, even though it had 2 strong performances from him and Driver in it. Riley Keough is great in this. Topher Grace. I thought the performances were all pretty good. Jimmy Simpson jumps in and out of this at times, and
nice.
It's a really fun when he does. My biggest critique is it just is really confusing. There's a lot of conspiracy in this. There's a lot of like connecting the dots, and at times I felt pretty lost watching it. Like, who is this person again? Why is this? Why are they doing this? Or how did they connect these things? But there's some really cool parts. There's a band called Jesus and the Three Dracula Brides or something like that, which I think is supposed to be like a Father John Misty type band. Yeah, where they're kind of like playing on this like
Jesus and the Brides of Dracula.
Yeah, there you go. And the Brides of Dracula. And they really play on this like folky rock thing. And he gets led to this person called the Songwriter at one point. And the way he gets there is that he stumbles onto this guy after confronting Jesus and being like, hey, like, tell me about this song you wrote. And he's like, I didn't even write that one. That came from the songwriter. And he's like, which ones did you write? And he's like, I wrote everyone but this one, this one, this one. And he's like, so you wrote all the ones that aren't hits? And like, it was a pretty funny, I think, commentary on how like the people who are talented in Hollywood aren't actually as talented as you probably think. There's also a lot about like gender that comes to the top when you really think about the themes of this movie. A lot about how
a girl going missing.
Yeah, a girl goes missing is kind of like the plot driver, the mystery at the center of all this. But really, it's this idea that the women within Hollywood seem to kind of pass along from these powerful men to powerful men, and are kind of like passed along without really getting much say within the system. And I thought that was pretty thoughtful, but didn't totally land. So I think think with a little more refining, this could have been a really good movie, but overall, pretty middling for me.
Interesting.
Do you plan on checking this one out?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. See, I was, aware of the movie for some time. Obviously, we both, both got on the radar after I went to
Yeah.
con, but A24 only put in theaters for 1 week, the week right before Endgame. They just took it right
Mhm.
out, and it was only in, I think, like 3 theaters that week. So I had no way to see it, but at least they put it on VOD right away. But definitely strikes itself as just kind of one of those like sunk cost movies. They're like, oh well, it definitely is like more of an artsy, like shoot your shot kind of movie. And if
Mhm.
it doesn't land with enough critics, it's kind of hard to see the movie selling itself enough to make any money. So I understand why they just ripped it right out of theaters, basically. But yeah, I definitely want to give it a shot. Just didn't have time. Would you say does it have an identity as a LA movie? As the name would suggest, it's set in Los Angeles, Silver Lake neighborhood. But I think LA movies is a really cool subgenre, especially within noirs, within mystery films. And like Destroyer last year, I thought was really great and had a cool LA identity. But did you think this said then? Obviously, the story is definitely involved with LA. You think's unique to LA entertainment industry. But do you think it would fit into that category well?
Yeah, I think it would, especially because the way that they're at the beginning are jumping around from like these parties in these different neighborhoods. There's really a distinct feel of like where they're going within the
Oh, that's
story, and
cool.
there's even a part where, and it's a bit of a on the nose metaphor, but they're talking about being like kept in these like mausoleums almost in a way, like trapped within them. And he like looks out the Hollywood sign, and it's just kind of like, oh, what's the real mausoleum, man? Is it this Hollywood
Ooh,
system? Is it
gotcha.
this life we're living in here? Which, like I said, a little on the nose, but like it's effective. So definitely a LA movie, and I really would recommend checking it out, if not for checking out something thoughtful and interesting. And it's video on demand at this point, so like a couple bucks on your Amazon Prime account won't hurt. Um,
Word.
Talk to me about Detective Pikachu, because boy, I didn't know I needed Detective Pikachu in my life, but I really want to go see this movie.
Yeah, so I actually was a little disappointed in it, to be honest.
No.
I'm definitely in the minority on that. It's getting rave response, especially from Pokemon fans, and I think it's one of those films that most people had no expectations for. That when they saw that first trailer, they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, this actually looks pretty good." And I will say, the movie looks really good. I think right away
Mhm.
when you get to forgot the name, Rhyme City, there's this metropolis that Pokemon and humans live in harmony together. There's no battling, there's no capturing, and they're just kind of chilling in a city. And it's got a very like kids movie meets Blade Runner vibe, where you get like the noir colors of it all, and the whole story is, the name might suggest, is there's a mystery going on. So Detective Pikachu, and there's literally a Humphrey Bogart movie, black and white movie on TV for a brief moment, and it's definitely a nod to those kind of old school detective movies. But visually, I thought it looked really cool, and the Pokemon overall, I think the CGI is effective, and they do feel like they're part of the world,
Mhm.
which is definitely something that needed to work. If that was not successful, nothing else would have mattered. So they definitely nailed that. For me, ultimately, my issue with it was just it's rated PG,
Mhm.
and it's ultimately just a kids movie. And the plot is simple, easy to predict, and just a little juvenile. And I don't know. I guess I wanted it to be a little smarter than it was, And I think maybe Ryan Reynolds voicing Pikachu uh, gave me unfair expectations. I was kind of wanting him to be more Deadpool-y, and he has lots of great one-liners and quippy comments, but they were just a little few and far between for me to keep me going, because I thought the story was ultimately a bit of a bore for me. So uh, disappointed in that regard. But there's a lot of cool nods for Pokemon fans. I mean,
Mhm.
this and like there's nods to like the show and the games, like Squirtle hanging out with the firefighters and Growlithe with the cops and a Jigglypuff putting someone to sleep in a restaurant while singing, and things touchstones for people that have known about Pokemon for some time.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like it goes across all the genres. You see Pokemon from all over, but as you can imagine, you see mostly the original 150, and Mewtwo's in this, as you see in the trailer.
I
So,
was gonna ask about that. What is Mewtwo's role within the story?
yeah, Mewtwo is again, he's interesting, but it's like the kind of like archetype he plays in the movie is something we've seen before. And if it was, if, I wish this movie was rated PG-13. I just wish it had a little punched up just a little bit more. I understand why it wasn't that, but you could have done even more with Mewtwo. I think there's this twist at the end that I won't spoil. Twist at the very end that I didn't even notice at the time that I started thinking about. It was actually like, it's very very illogical. It's regarding Pikachu and
Mhm.
regarding Pikachu, and it's just something weird that I didn't suspect. But ultimately, I think it's a successful movie for what it's trying to do. And video game adaptations has a very poor track record. I mean, we reviewed Tomb Raider beginning of last year, and I think that was a movie that was inoffensive at best and forgettable at worst. Wasn't really bad per se, and honestly a step in the right direction. I think Detective Pikachu has enough like visual flair and personality that it stands out, and it'll be naturally compared to Sonic the Hedgehog once that comes out. And given the reaction to the first Sonic trailer, we can probably imagine how that will go. But you know, Detective Pikachu is existing on a curve. It's existing as a video game movie and one made for kids. So it's tough to be too critical of it. But yeah, I think it's definitely a watch for anyone who has any Pokemon knowledge. But if you don't know anything about Pokemon, really, like of Pikachu and that's about it, you're kind of just thrown in, and it might not be that interesting to you unless you're just cool with a simple story.
It's interesting because I expected this to dethrone Avengers at the box
Me too,
office, and it didn't.
domestically. Yeah,
So I'm wondering, one, does that mean Avengers might actually get there and surpass Avatar as the highest grossing movie? It slowed down quite a bit. So
yeah.
um,
It's comment on that. It seems like it's probably going to get really, really close to Avatar, if not
mhm,
beat it for the worldwide record. But there's basically no chance that it can beat Force Awakens for the domestic record now.
yeah.
It's actually dipped below the Force Awakens pace now after 3 weeks. So that's bad news given the big slate of competition only coming for Endgame. So yeah, it's I think Pikachu had a good launch, and it won one country over Endgame, Japan. Shocker. Um, but I think I would not be surprised if this has some decent legs as a again PG movie, a kids movie, and
Mhm.
as more and more people see Endgame, they're going to look for something else to see. And John Wick 3 is definitely much more concentrated to a certain demo. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
So I think this will have a really good second weekend, and it does deserve it. And then, whether what is cool about this movie is that it doesn't have any obvious setup for a sequel. I thought that was a big issue with Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider did a lot of time like attempting to set up more and kind of rushing past the basic stuff that I need to do in the first movie.
Mhm.
Detective Pikachu is very self-contained, which makes sense considering it's based off a very small scale 3DS game, and they didn't try and tackle like Blue version the game and make some
Yeah.
grand epic adventure tale. It's not quite that, and I think that was a really good choice. And you're starting small, and whether this leads to more Pokemon movies or Super Smash Brothers universe, as a lot of people are
Mhm.
praying for, we'll see. But a little too kiddie for me at the end of the day. But I'm not hating.
Yeah. I really wonder, like, what it would be like for a Pokemon like trilogy where it followed like the original games or something like that. I guess you
Yeah,
can't do the original, but like where they broke it up, where it's like the first half of the gym, second half of the gyms, and you take on the final. I forgot they're called, the league or whatever.
Elite
The
Four,
Yes, Elite Four. Thank you. Um,
the Pokemon
I think
League.
that could be cool depending on like which Pokemon they chose and who was cast in it. But
Yeah,
uh,
they've done some cool like YouTube shorts on like the Pokemon channel and little like anime shorts, and it is a surprisingly rich world. Obviously, a lot of that is that the fact that there's like 800 fucking Pokemon now. There's tons of them, right?
mhm.
But it's a lived-in world as far as anime worlds go, and I don't know. I would be curious what kind of sequel they would make because you have a small scale story. You have Justice Smith and Catherine Newton as these two kids, and they're like they're your adult human leads. But you can't make a sequel without Detective Pikachu, and I think having Detective Pikachu, Ryan Reynolds voicing this uh, anthropomorphic Pikachu that is like a jokester, and works with cops, like I feel like that kind of limits your your runway for what you can
Yeah.
do at a sequel. So maybe it'll be a one-off, and no problem with that.
No problem with that at all. And we're gonna wrap up there for this week. What does everybody need to watch, listen to for next week's pod, Dave?
Well, obviously the Game of Thrones series finale. No one needs to be reminded of that. Also, Barry season 2 finale. Big day for HBO. John Wick 3, as we mentioned before, John Wick Parabellum. Uh, a quartet of albums, all notable. Tyler the Creator, Igor, Carly Rae Jepsen, The National, Injury Reserve, this rap trio I really like, uh, as well as 2 other shows. Catch 22 on Hulu with George Clooney's return, and Fleabag season 2, the second and final season of Fleabag with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. So lots of stuff to talk about. We probably won't get to all of that right away, but watch that. Easy season 3 came out recently. Lots of stuff that we'll be talking about next week and coming up.
So stay tuned and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. Also go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod. And that way you can subscribe to us anywhere you want to. We love you. We appreciate you. Enjoy Game of Thrones finale. Peace out.